Afia and I are here today with our guest Dakin Weekley. Dakin has played a key role in the Democratic Party of Key West and Monroe County. Dakin has been a long-time Democratic activist and a Bernie Sanders delegate to the 2020 Democratic National Convention. He is a native to South Florida and his family has been here in the area for generations. His keen insight into not only the region as a whole, but the Democratic Party specifically can add a great deal of clarity to those of us who have still been wondering about a few details that arose during the past week.
Thank you so much, Erin, and pleasure to meet you, Dakin. So the first set of our questions here pertain to a comparative analysis with the elections in 2016. And my first question here is, because of COVID-19, obviously, in many states, voters are actually mailing in their votes. How do you think this will impact future elections in this country?
Well, I think we're going to see more of that going forward. I think that it increases turnout. I don't see any reason not to vote by mail, or not to encourage people to vote by mail, not to encourage states to put together vote by mail systems in their states. And yeah, I think that's something that we're going to see more of going forward.
What do you think Americans want from their president, and especially with Trump downplaying the whole coronavirus pandemic? And how are these expectations really different from back in 2016?
So I think Americans want leadership in their president, and they want somebody who's going to cut out a path and lead them on that path. I think COVID is a situation where we haven't seen this in a long time, where we need consolidated communal effort to overcome it. It needs everybody to work together and be on the same page. And a leader would bring everyone together, have a plan in place, and lead us forward.
Right. But, you know, with Trump filing all of these crazy lawsuits, do you think we have more shocks coming our way?
No, I think that they're going to get, I think that so far they've come forward with no evidence. And I think that they've gotten Rule 11 violations for some of the things that they've brought forward. It's frivolous. I don't see any of that going anywhere. It's unfortunately the kind of action that we've come to expect from President Trump.
Well, interestingly, the voter turnout this time was more. At least in 4 states, I believe the number exceeded 2016. Why do you think that was the case? Why did more voters come out this time?
I think it was a combination of really extreme circumstances for people economically, with their health, and also an increase in vote by mails that will always increase voter turnout. I think that people saw this election as being very important, and they answered.
What's your take on the current situation in Michigan? What do you think will happen in Michigan?
So are you referring to them questioning the voter machines that?
Correct.
In some of the counties. So my understanding of that, from what I've read, is none of the results in those counties have been different from historically how they've been. Mm-hmm. So I don't see any evidence that anything untowards has happened in those cases. And I also have to say, I mean, this comes up has come up in a number of elections previously about voting machines. Are they changing votes? Are they not recording votes correctly? In 2004, a lot of people talked about that with the Diebold machines. It turned out to be really nothing. I think that we're in the same situation. I think we're dealing with a group of people who are willing to reach for any branch that they can, or any, and you see that the lawsuits, questioning whether or not we have an electoral system that is honest and fair. And I think that all follows the same the same vein of thought.
Interestingly, this time, women, the largest voting bloc in America, once again played a very, very important role, especially with Kamala Harris being Biden's VP nominee. What is your take on that?
Well, I think women are always an important part of the electorate. They make up 51% of the country, something like that. They have traditionally broke pretty strongly for Democrats. And the Democratic Party, I think, has mostly protected the interests of women, or at least maybe more so than the other party. Maybe not as much as they should, but you know, and I think that then it's indicative of that they win the largest share of women of the two parties.
So we had a lot of racism issues that came up this time during the elections, but it's very interesting to see that according to Pew Research Center, Trump actually won 8% of Black votes, which is 2% more than back in 2016. Why do you think that's the case?
I think that the Democratic Party did not do enough to sell a forward-thinking idea of what we were going to do economically, how we were going to build a more advantageous class structure to working people in this country. I think that seeing them slip among minority voters compared to 2016, I think should be a warning sign to the Democratic Party that they need to step up and do more to fight for economic equality. And yeah, I think that's the situation there.
Finally, unlike last time, Trump this year was in fact not successful in framing the candidates by leaking all the various hacked emails. What is your take on international interference in the US election this time?
I don't think that international interference was that big of a part of either one of the elections. I think that the emails that they had with Hillary Clinton in 2016 landed better because there was some truth to what was in them, right? I mean, WikiLeaks, when you read the WikiLeaks articles or the emails that they released, the Clinton people were really doing this stuff, you know, and no matter how the people of WikiLeaks got it, if it was shady to have hackers give it over to you, or if they were just anonymous sources that are traditional in journalism, frankly, I think makes really no difference when you see what the content is. And then the content was there. And it was also something that people already kind of believed about Hillary Clinton and kind of believed about some of the people that she was surrounded with. And then it was really easy to believe that those things were going on when the evidence came forward. With Hunter Biden, I mean, it's just also weak, I'd say. The connections are weak, and, you know, none of it directly implicates Joe Biden. And yeah, I mean, I think that's why it didn't work this time.
Okay, so thank you for that. I'm going to touch on something that's a little bit more local and pertains to Dakin and I more specifically. Unlike other Hispanic voters in the United States, a majority of Cuban Americans identify as Republican, an ongoing issue that tends to put Florida on the spotlight each election year. Specifically speaking, according to recent Pew Research Center surveys conducted just this summer, 58% of Cuban Americans tend to lean Republican or registered Republican directly, versus 38% of Dems that either lean, 38% of Cuban American Dems that lean or are registered as Democratic voters. In South Florida, like I said, where Dakin and I live, the Latinx community has widely rejected what many would consider or have called radical socialist agenda that's kind of taking over in Washington these days. I would like to know what your thoughts are on that, and why do you think there is such a harsh reaction in South Florida, specifically from the Latinx community, to nearly any kind of socialist platforms or socialist-like platforms? Do you see that changing generationally as well, or recently in this election specifically?
So I'd push back on that a little bit. I don't think that there is any kind of socialist platform or anything in DC that I think is radical left in any way, or that is. I think that a concerted effort by the Republican Party to use that word as a cudgel against any forward movement, and to use it in South Florida with people who have some cultural experience, some cultural trauma maybe with something that is associated with that word. But I think I also don't think that Cuban Americans are against progressive social policy. I think they're against the word socialist. And, you know, when you look at some of the numbers from Miami-Dade, Biden won Miami-Dade 53% of the vote, which was worse than how Clinton did. And frankly, not how good a Democrat needs to do in Miami-Dade to win Florida. But the minimum wage increase, $15 an hour, got 71% of the vote in Miami-Dade. Andrew Gillum, who they spent lots of time calling a communist and a socialist, won 61% of the vote in Miami-Dade. I think that I think the problem comes down to having, you know, maybe not the strongest person on the top of the ticket, and them not advocating for themselves in a useful way and not pushing back on that in a constructive way. I don't think that the way to push back on it is to run away from being someone that supports social progress. I think that you say, you know, I want people to have access to healthcare. I want people to make enough money to send their kids to college and to live a decent life. I wouldn't call those things socialist. And I think that, yeah, I think that's kind of where that stands.
So would you say that playing on those kind of fears, as you were just saying, was used by either major party one way or another to benefit or to hurt the other?
Yes, I mean, I think every ad that I saw in this election cycle that was targeted to Miami-Dade had some purported Cuban small business owner talking about how you can't raise taxes on small businesses. Joe Biden doesn't understand business. He's never owned a small business. Some of them did come out and call him a socialist. And also Debbie McCarcel-Powell, they had these ads where they're like, oh, she's associated with this Ukrainian oligarch, so she's a communist. I don't know if they know what the history of the oligarchs and communists are, but it didn't work out well for the oligarchs, and the communists weren't big fans. They like maybe sort of rounded up all the oligarchs, but so yeah, I mean, yeah, it's used in South Florida all the time. I mean, I think there was an article in the WLRN the other day about the South Florida McCarthyism that's used in Dade County politics, and you know, it's dangerous if you can just call someone this label without further dissecting what those things mean, or you know, what they're supporting as a candidate, and that's enough to ruin their candidacy. I mean, I think that's not a direction we want to be going in as a country or as a society.
Well, thank you for that answer. And lastly, over here, I want to touch back on something that Afia was bringing up earlier in regards to women voters. The Washington Post recently published an article entitled "Black Women Save Democrats, Don't Make Us Do It Again." Though, as Afia pointed out, women are the largest voting bloc in America, and as you said, they tend to be around 51% of the population. How do you perceive that women may or may not have been divided this election? How do you believe that that might be perceived for the future of the Democratic Party?
The way the votes broke down was that women of different ethnicities voted more in line with the ethnicity that they were a part of than significantly as a block as women. So like Black women voted, I think something like 90% for Joe Biden. Black men voted 80% for Joe Biden. I think white women voted like 54% for Joe Biden, or maybe 60% for Joe Biden. And white men, I believe, voted 47% for Joe Biden or something like that. The white male ethnic category was the only one that Donald Trump won. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence there that that Black women played a significant role in electing Joe Biden, and all the minorities did, really. I mean, if it was just up to white people and white men specifically, I think that Donald Trump would win 50 states, right? And I think I saw a map that suggested that if it was white men and women, and those were the only people that could vote, Donald Trump would have won, I think, like 47 states or something like that. So yeah, he owes his victory completely to minority voters and women voters. So, yeah.
Well, thank you both for that. Coming back to the point on the lawsuits, many of them, including Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia, they really dismissed Trump's lawsuits. Where do you think Trump is really going with this?
I think he's just flailing around, like a drowning man, trying to grab something, whatever, trying to make people distrust the results, maybe to, set himself up with a news television station, or I mean, who knows, right?
Okay. Do you really think that it may come to Secret Services having to escort Trump out of the White House in a literal sense?
I think that if he finds that advantageous to his brand, then yes. I think that if it, I'd be surprised, maybe, but maybe not as surprised as I'd like to believe that I would be.
So based on current news kind of developing just in the last 24 hours or so, if the doors of the Supreme Court are knocked on by the Trump administration at any point prior to January 2021, what do you think the outcome will be from that?
I think as of right now, they don't have any case. I think that it would take them quite a while to build a case if they were going to try and bring it to the Supreme Court. It's very different than what happened in 2000 in Florida. There are no states where there's a significant number of votes missing, or there's questions about who won. I mean, these things are all decided in 2020, unlike they were 20 years ago when they did go to the Supreme Court and overturned an election.
So as Biden actually plans his transition, the Republicans really declined to recognize the results of the elections. But with the exception of some of the Republicans, that includes former President George W. Bush, most have really been silent. And this kind of suggests that even in defeat, Trump still has a powerful grip on his party and some of its elected leaders. What does this really mean for Biden?
Well, I hope that Biden is going into this having learned something from spending 8 years in the Barack Obama administration. The Republican Party is not filled with honest actors who are trying to come to some sort of agreement to how best to help the American people. The Republican Party of today, and arguably of at least the last 20 years, is a party that's about securing its own power and building it and keeping it and enriching people that that are their bosses, essentially, that paid for them to get elected, and now they want that investment to pay off. And the Republican Party works towards paying that investment off. So I hope that Joe Biden is coming into this presidency remembering that when he was vice president, the Republicans never compromised on anything for Barack Obama. They held open a record number of judicial seats, refused to seat his appointments, stole a Supreme Court justice seat. Yeah, so it's going to be not an easy situation, and not a lot of room for compromise, I don't think.
Okay, well, I want to thank Dakin Weekley for joining us here on our first podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of our listeners. If you guys have any suggestions for future podcasts, please shoot us an email via our website. We're all ears. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.